This is Macias' World War I lecture for World History. This lecture will cover the long-term and short-term causes of the war, and it will be broken up into two parts. First part covering the long-term causes, and the second part covering the short-term causes. As with these video lectures, you will have the ability to pause whenever you want so that you can get the information down. Therefore, I will have some brief pauses in between slides, but I will not be lingering too long. Again, you can pause as needed to make sure that you get down the information you need from each slide. Now, these long-term causes of the war are not in any necessary order. One cause is not more important or more long-lasting than the other. They all had their part in creating the circumstances that led to the outbreak of the Great War. Now, one of the big ones that you guys are already familiar with is nationalism. Nationalism was covered in the imperialism unit, and it was certainly one of the underlying causes behind imperialism, and we saw it also in India and China as those nations sought to counter some of the imperialism with their own nationalism. Now, the nationalism we're going to talk about here is, of course, nationalism going on in Europe, meaning different European countries, the people in those countries exercising their wishes for self-government, greater government, bigger countries, more powerful countries, whatever their particular breed of nationalism meant to them. Now, in general, nationalism is a devotion to one's country and people. They share a culture, they share a language, they may share a heritage or a history. Okay, any one of these can lead to a feeling of nationalism. Now, nationalism led to German and Italian unifications. Unification meaning the grouping or coming together of different parts into a united single part. Now, nationalism also created a highly intense sense of competition between these nations. Germany, Austria-Hungary, Great Britain, Russia, Italy, and France all wanted to be the best of the great powers in Europe, and these nations became heavy rivals. They became rivals and so competitive to a point that even small territorial disputes turned into justifications to go to war. So even sometimes the smallest slights might be touted by the leaders of these nations as a reason to protect the nation's honor and go to war. Now, nationalism also struck smaller parts that were within some of these nations, specifically the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Now, Serbia is a small part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire down in the southern part of the empire. Serbia considered itself an independent nation, and they started an independence movement against the Austro-Hungarian Empire. They also wanted control of the region today known as Bosnia-Herzegovina. And the reason was because this region, along with Serbia, they were Slavic speaking. And so that means it was kind of similar to the Russian language. Now, Serbia wanted this territory for itself. They felt that it could rule, and they felt a sense of nationalism because of those shared linguistic connections. And Serbia was militantly independent about all this. They wanted their own nation, and they were willing to fight, kill, and die for it.
It was called by some the war to end all wars. Socialists dubbed it the Imperialist War. Soldiers often called it the Trench War. World War I was, in fact, the first modern war. A war waged with the ingenuity of the industrial age, from telegraphs to tanks, movies to machine guns. Despite being a modern war, the roots of World War I were steeped in Europe's tumultuous past. As far back as 1870, France and Germany were enemies. When Germany won the Franco-Prussian War, it seized two French provinces, Alsace and Lorraine. From then on, a competitiveness for European leadership evolved between the two countries, and a spirit of nationalism gripped them both. This nationalism went far beyond simply maintaining patriotic feelings for one's country. Instead, Germany, France, and other European countries believed that the interests of their homeland should always be put ahead of world cooperation. The resulting contempt for one country by another inevitably led to the risk of war. Nationalism was at the root of conflicts between Russia and Austria-Hungary. Russians believed that they were the protector of all of Europe's Slavic people, regardless of which government they happened to live under. For example, Serbia was an independent country, but millions of other Serbs lived under Austria-Hungary's rule. The result was an intense rivalry between Russia and Austria-Hungary for influence over Serbians in the country of Serbia. Poland had been divided among Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Russia, and wanted to reunite in their own Polish state with self-rule. The Czechoslovakians also wanted freedom and self-determination. Under Austria-Hungary's rule, they were not even allowed to use their own language. Consequently, by 1914, Europe was a hotbed of nationalism, and tensions ran high between the governments and their constituents.
Okay, so a short video there giving some background information on the idea of nationalism and its part to play as one of the causes of the outbreak of the Great War. Second long-term cause, imperialism. This is a term and a concept you guys are very familiar with. It's larger countries going out and taking over smaller or weaker countries to extract resources, set up markets, and to dominate the economic, social, political, and often even the cultural landscapes of the nations that they took over. Now, imperialism also had its part to play, along with nationalism, in what the nations of Europe called attaining great power status. In other words, the more colonies you had, the better, the more stronger, the more powerful, the better a nation you were. And so because of this quest for colonies, and this race for colonies, many Europeans went to the edge of war between 1905 and 1911 to claim or covet as many of these lands as possible. And it inevitably led to rivalries and high levels of mistrust between all of the nations of Europe, especially the big ones who were in the big business of colonizing. Now, as mentioned a little bit earlier, territorial disputes pushed many nations to the edge of war between the 1870s and 1913. And in fact, France and Germany did go to war back in 1870. The French lost. At the time, the Prussians were the most dominant of the Germanic kingdoms or large territories of Germany. And so they kicked France's tail and forced France not only to pay money, but France lost Alsace-Lorraine, one of their highly coveted territories. And they also lost a significant amount of face in the lost conflict. Now, Austria-Hungary and Russia, both of those nations claimed, and not only claimed the territory, but also claimed to protect the Balkan region. So this is Serbia, Romania, Bulgaria, southern portions of Austria-Hungary. Okay, this is the Balkan region. Austria-Hungary claimed most, if not all of it. Russia also claimed parts of it. So you had some kind of boiling, not quite outright conflict, but some boiling beneath the surface conflict between Austria-Hungary and Russia. Again, all down to territorial claims and disputes. Now the Serbs, the Bulgarians, and the Romanians, they all wanted their own countries. They were sick of Austria-Hungary's rule, and they were sick of the empire's ambitions. Sarajevo, a part of the southern tip of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, was a particular hotbed of nationalism, particularly Serbian nationalism. The Serbians also claimed Sarajevo, and they felt that Austria-Hungary had no right to it. Austria-Hungary, of course, did not agree. They had earlier claimed Sarajevo and simply told the Serbians, you just get to deal with it, be quiet, and live your own life. Clearly, the Serbs were not having any of it. All right, so we've laid out nationalism, we've laid out imperialism, territorial claims and disputes. Now we'll take a look at a third long-term cause, militarism. All right, you keep a large army ready and waiting for conflict. Okay, they're prepared for all times for war. The emphasis is on organizing and being able to move troops in case of war. Strong countries, great power status countries, all had strong militaries. This was a huge belief with these nations at the time, and if you were going to be a great power, you not only had to be highly nationalistic, you not only had to have, or at least go out and try to get as many colonies as you could, but you also had to have a big and strong military. Now, this militarism, this idea, this kind of like theme of great power status that's tying all of these together so far, it also led to an arms race. And this arms race simply meant bigger, badder, and deadlier weapons. The bigger, the more powerful, the more damage and death and destruction they could cause, the better. And the more of these you had meant that you were a great power. Germany in particular wanted to have a larger navy than Britain. We all know that Britain's navy is top gun. They've been so since before the Napoleonic era, and nothing has really changed. Now, Kaiser Wilhelm II was the leader of Germany just prior to the war and during the war. And his ambitions, not to mention his ego, were extremely large. They were very high. And Wilhelm in particular wanted to have a larger and more powerful navy than Britain. No small feat. But that's what Kaiser Wilhelm set his sights on, and he pushed his country to do just that. Now, in addition to all European nations practicing this arms race and militarism, even Japan, way over on the other side of the world, in Asia, was practicing this. Okay, Japan was also building up its military. They wanted to get in on the great power status game. More about Japan later. Okay, we have the build-up, training. All year, all the time, ready for war. This was the same with the French, the British, Germans, Austro-Hungarians. Didn't matter. They were all doing it. Heavy artillery. Larger, bigger, badder, more deadly cannons. Cannons that could fire all kinds of different shells, from regular anti-personnel shells, which could take out masses of troops, to earth-moving shells, basically shells that caused so much damage when they hit that they destroyed and uprooted large parts of Earth. And then, of course, the ever-nasty gas shells. More on those later. Larger, deadlier battleships. They were called dreadnoughts. Okay, these battleships would be capable of taking on multiple smaller ships, and they could go to toe with each other at full broadsides, one dreadnought against another. Large sea battles, there weren't a whole lot of them, but there were definitely some that caused a lot of damage to all sides involved. Now, one example of the bigger, badder guns was the Paris gun, manufactured and owned by Germany. It could fire approximately 70 miles, and it could hit Paris from Germany. Paris is the capital of France, so it's deep within France, and Germany could hit it from within their own territory. It was so big and so heavy that it could only be transported and fired from a railroad car. It could not be moved otherwise. It was so big and heavy. But it did do its job. It did actually hit Paris. And then we have the Maxim gun. This is just one of the examples used by the Germans. Eventually, all sides had the machine gun. In German, it is known as the Maschinengewehr. Rapid fire bullets. The unit could be transported with anywhere from a 2 to 3 or even 4-man team, depending on the size of the weapon. So it was mobile, and it could be moved from position to position wherever it was needed, and it could spit out rounds in rapid succession and pretty much lay waste to many attacking soldiers. Now, the last long-term cause we'll take a look at is the system of alliances. Now, looking back at Germany, the German kingdoms unifying from the previous lecture, Otto von Bismarck sought security for his new Germany. He knew that Germany would not be able to keep its dominance without some help, because he had powerful enemies in France, powerful enemies in Russia, not to mention Britain across the North Sea. So he set up an alliance with the Austro-Hungarian Empire, 1879, and then with Italy. This formed what was known as the Triple Alliance. Now, Wilhelm II, meaning Germany, he also had a treaty with Russia, but very unwisely, he let that treaty expire. So we have Bismarck, very famous for his mustache and the big pointy helmet. And then Kaiser Wilhelm II. All right, looking very dignified on the left and looking a little overdone on the right. Now, more on the system of alliances. France, not to be left out and not to be left alone, signed a treaty with Russia. Now, because of the reason they set up this treaty with Russia is because they were, let's face it, they were scared of German unification and aggression. They had already been beaten by Germany once. They did not want to be taken by surprise again. So you have the Franco-Russian alliance of 1891. Britain, who was nervous about not having enough buddies, not having enough friends, they joined the French and Russian alliance. This would be known as the Triple Entente. Now, not to forget Serbia. We'll talk about them again, only because they play such a huge role in the beginning of the war. Now, they shared a common language and a background or history with Russia. And Russia considered themselves the protectors of Serbia and of all Slavic-speaking peoples. Okay, so we have quite the tangled knot of nationalism, territorial claims and disputes, militarism going on, and now these alliances. Little cartoon humor there for you guys. Now, crisis in the Balkans. Okay, the Balkans region is in the southern part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and it goes all the way down to the southern part of Serbia and Bulgaria. It includes Romania. Now, Serbia wanted to control a good chunk of the Balkans. They certainly wanted the Bosnia-Herzegovina region. They certainly wanted Sarajevo, as well as their own independent territory. Austria-Hungary said no way. They weren't having any of it, and they simply just annexed Bosnia and Sarajevo 1908, 1909. This sent Serbia through the roof. From here on out, Serbia was not going to be very interested in trying to negotiate with Austria-Hungary, and various people within Serbia started to take active roles in trying to do whatever it could to make life difficult for the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So difficult, in fact, that the Serbs had fought 2 separate wars earlier in the 1900s. Now, some of these wars were with other Slavic peoples. These wars were with the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and so by 1910, 1912, 1914, the Serbs were already a pretty tough and seasoned fighting force. The Austro-Hungarians, not so much. They were larger, had more weapons, better weapons, but at the beginning of the war, the Serbs were the better fighters. Now, as the circle indicates, Sarajevo is to the west of Serbia and in the southern part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Serbia coveted the Sarajevo area, and this area was a huge hotbed of Serbian and Slavic nationalism. All of them anti-Austro-Hungarian. Which brings us again to the graphic of the powder keg. Okay, again, the powder keg is a large wooden barrel filled with gunpowder with a fuse sticking out, and the fuse is lit. The Balkan region is the powder keg. The lit fuse are all of these long-term causes slowly burning their way towards detonating the powder keg. And this is where we will leave off part 1 of this lecture, the long-term causes of World War I. The next section, which you will take care of later, is section 2, the short-term cause of World War I, as well as the outbreak.